That Wish You Wish You Never Made by Po_Tato2. Chapter 3. I Want Him to Live. In a different life, Izuku may have stopped and stayed at the entrance of UA in awe, marvelled at the fact that he was wearing a UA uniform, been amazed at the sight of the gigantic buildings before him, famous across Japan. But in this life, Izuku's face didn't budge, and his feet didn't stumble as he walked into the awe-inspiring gates of UA with a blank face, a hint of disdain in his eyes. It's hard not to harbour a kernel of hatred for the place, with its flashy exterior and heroic stereotypes. Izuku checks the map he was given once he's on the grounds, because there's no sense in wasting time or power trying to find the correct building when there's a very easy solution in front of him. His classroom is easy to find once he's in the building, and even better, there are only a few other brats in the room. Ignoring the engine mutation boy he remembers from the entrance exam, Izuku takes his seat. He ignores the chattering of his new classmates that only grows with each person that enters the classroom, and he ignores every attempt made to talk to him. He honestly just counts himself lucky that no one has tried to touch him yet, because what little he's managed to learn about teenagers his age indicates they aren't that far removed from toddlers, just with more mobility and more hormones. Loud, always talking, don't understand the concept of personal space, and likes to have everyone's attention on them. Once the classroom is filled with people who Izuku is supposed to be classmates with, he's madly debating leaping from the classroom window as the noise level steadily grows louder, when he notices the classroom door open and no one enter. Glancing down, Izuku stares at the yellow monstrosity on the floor that he can see Eraserhead's Quirk nestled inside. What the fuck? Is he trapped in there? Izuku stares in incredulity as the yellow thing slowly starts to rotate, no one else paying attention to it. Seconds later, Izuku feels a vague horror as a window appears, and he immediately makes eye contact with Eraserhead, whose face fits perfectly inside the window. The sudden wave of amusement Izuku can feel from his intent Quirk tells him that Eraserhead finds his reaction amusing, so he probably isn't in danger and is just weird. Whatever. Izuku's worry disappears, and he lets his face settle back into blankness, although he's curious what exactly Eraserhead's plan is. Somehow, Eraserhead smoothly rises up from the ground, and as several people yelp, he unzips his sleeping bag, letting it fall to the floor. He's drinking some sort of pouch thing, and he flares his Quirk at the class, which immediately draws the rest of the stragglers' attention. It took you 8 seconds to quiet, and only a single person noticed me enter the room. I hope you plan to shape up since you're sitting in the hero course. Izuku didn't have any particular opinion on Eraserhead before this, but he thinks that he may actually like the man, given his introduction. His classmates, Izuku immediately notices, do not seem to share his view. Grab the uniform with their name on it and change, then meet me outside on the lawn. Be quick about it. Eraserhead manages to pull out a stack of uniforms from his sleeping bag, which he drops on the top of his desk before walking out of the room. And honestly, Izuku respects that. Several of his classmates are saying something, but Izuku doesn't really think any of them are worth listening to at the moment, so he ignores all of them and gets up, marching to the front of the classroom and digging through the stack of uniforms without a word. As expected, his movement pushes everyone else up, and Izuku rolls his eyes to himself. 6 minutes later, Izuku is waiting on the lawn in front of Eraserhead, and the kid with the elemental Quirk, fire left and ice right, temperature balance, emitter and mutation, is quick to join him. We're going to be taking a Quirk assessment test, Eraserhead announces once everyone is out of the changing rooms. Izuku sneers at the chattering that bursts out of his classmates. Eraserhead seems to share his opinion, based on the way he says whoever comes in last will get expelled. The ensuing panic makes Izuku's eye twitch, and he actively has to fight to keep from rolling his eyes. Naive. Shigaraki? Eraserhead jerks his head when Izuku looks at him. Izuku pushes forward to the bundle of students from where he'd strategically placed himself at the very back. Izuku just barely brushes all the tips of his fingers over the girl from the entrance exam's shoulder. Gravity nullification, potential manipulation, nausea side effects, emitter and fingertip mutation, as he walks past, fast enough that no one even notices. No one but Eraserhead. Eraserhead, whose red eyes burn into Izuku as he steps into the circle, not wasting a second before grabbing the ball offered to him and activating the girl's Quirk on it. It is dead silent as he throws the ball straight up, and as Eraserhead eventually turns his counter to show the measurement of infinity. Wow, you guys have super similar quirks! The red-haired guy, emitter, skin hardening, dry out side effects, shouts with a good-natured grin. Voices start to murmur. The girl stares at Izuku with wide eyes, a hint of terror and a sizable amount of confusion in them. Eraserhead looks at Izuku, and Izuku knows he's going to let him take the lead. May as well get it over with. No. Izuku looks at the guy, his expression blank. We don't. It's hers. And just like that, all the talking stops. What are you on about, man? The redhead chuckles nervously, but his smile looks much more forced than it did moments ago. The quirk I used. Izuku raises an eyebrow. It's hers. Another moment of deafening silence before the meaning of Izuku's words finally starts to sink in. So you copied it? A boy with round elbows says, glancing around like he doesn't understand why some people look so scared. I don't see why that's such a big deal. Izuku huffs out a breath in a way that could generously be called a laugh. No, I took it. No one is smiling anymore, Izuku notices. Stealing another's quirk is reprehensible. The one with the leg engines yells, right as someone else starts saying something about it being unfair, about it being impossible. Voices start rising quickly. Izuku can smell their terror. It only lasts for a few seconds before Eraserhead flashes his quirk at the class, shouting for silence. Izuku looks back at his naive classmates impassively. A boy in the back, the one with mental quirk, call and response, emitter, mind control, insomnia side effects, purple hair, meets Izuku's eyes, head tilted slightly. He is one of the few spots in the small crowd of students that lack fear or hostility. Before Eraser can say something else, Izuku looks over the rest of his classmates with a curled lip, making his expression as disgusted as possible. He starts to walk away from the chalk circle, but before he goes, he says, treating people like this is what makes a villain in the first place, you know? You may not want to be on the side of a hero who has his quirk, but the real question is if you would rather fight a villain with it instead. Several faces go pale, mouths dropping and eyes wide. Izuku rolls his eyes and walks back to merge with the class again, and does an admirable job of not reacting as people part to get out of his way. Izuku stops suddenly, though, making several people flinch, and reaches out his hand towards Uraraka, hovering his hand just above her shoulder. He cocks his head when she freezes, looking at him nervously. Well, do you want your quirk back or not? She flushes, but nods. The entire class watches silently as Izuku briefly touches all 5 fingers to her shoulder, then walks away. Todoroki, Eraserhead suddenly calls, jerking everyone's eyes back to him. Your turn. The next several tests pass in relative silence, everyone on edge. Izuku supposes it doesn't help that he continues to take quirks if they can help him, ignoring the growing reactions and emotions, the way people jerk away from him in vain. It's only after the sprint that someone grows the guts to ask him a question, however. Hey, Shigaraki, right? Izuku turns his head to meet eyes with the boy with the lightning bolt in his hair, emitter mutation, electricity generation amplification, overload side effects, who's looking at him with poorly hidden nerves. What? The kid blanches at Izuku's tone, but shoulders on asking. If you don't mind me asking, man, why didn't you use his quirk for the sprint? As he speaks, he points to the engine boy. Staring at the guy in silence for a few moments, Izuku decides to reward his bravery and answer his question. Although I could take mutation quirks, it tends to be extremely painful for the original owner to lose them, not to mention for myself to grow them. Everyone had turned and been entirely unsubtle about waiting for Izuku's answer, so Izuku gets to see the engine boy go pallid and pale, several people following his example, as his classmates seem to connect what Izuku's saying. Oh, the electricity boy mutters. Yeah, that makes sense, dude. Izuku makes a vague humming noise in response, already turning away. Intent, a quirk he often leaves on, if only for his own peace of mind, is telling him that the lightning bolt kid is more scared than curious of him. Although Izuku privately will admit, the fact that the boy at least pretended to be normal towards Izuku was a nice enough thought. The rest of the test pass in a tense, slightly terrified silence, Izuku desperately wants to take Yairo's quirk to experiment with, but he's all too aware that asking if he can borrow her quirk just to play around with it won't go over well. Not to mention, he doesn't have enough knowledge to really have fun with it. No one is surprised when the end results show Izuku in first place. When Izuku walks back to the changing rooms, there is a significant pause before the others start to follow him. The silence that ensues doesn't bother him, and neither does the awkward whispering that starts up in the classroom. None of it matters. They'll adapt. At the end of the day, Izuku turns to the end of a hallway, immediately making eye contact with Eraserhead, who'd been waiting for him, he knew. "Let's go," he says, and has the pleasure of watching Eraserhead's eyebrows raise. "Excuse me?" Rolling his eyes, Izuku starts walking. "Nezu wants to see me, doesn't he? That's what you came to get me for. Come on, I've got places to be." It only takes Izuku 2 steps for Eraserhead to start moving. They travel swiftly through the school in silence, passing the occasional lingering group of students or teachers. They are still 2 hallways away when Izuku realizes. He stops in his tracks, despite himself, and Eraserhead turns back to him when he realizes he's no longer keeping pace with him. Problem? "All Might's there?" Izuku asks, although it's more of a statement. The intent quirk tells him Eraserhead feels surprise, trepidation, concern towards him, and the man winces. Yeah. Izuku's eye twitches, and then he pulls his facial muscles under control as he starts walking again. How much did Nezu tell him? The pause before Eraserhead speaks doesn't bode well, and sure enough, Eraser says, all of it. Sighing, Izuku can't help but mutter, "Awesome." Eraserhead casts a glance at him from the side of his eye, then says, "You seem to already know how All Might feels about this situation." Izuku isn't going to tell him that All Might's hatred towards him is so strong it's nearly overwhelming, and they're not even in the same room. Call it intuition. The only response Eraserhead gives is a non-committal hum, but Izuku can feel the thrum of worry that runs around him. "Don't let him kill me," Izuku mutters right as the door to Nezu's office opens, and the spike of alarm from Eraserhead is a slight consolation for the hell he's positive this interaction is about to be. Izuku enters the room, Eraserhead behind him, and his eyes immediately fall on the figure that half the people on Earth could recognize by image alone. All Might stands tall, taking up far too much room in what is already a rather large office. Arms crossed over his chest, All Might turns and meets Izuku's eyes. He is not smiling. "Ah, Shotokan and Shigaraki-kun. Thank you for the prompt arrival," Nezu says, prompting everyone in his office to turn and look at him. Izuku can feel the way All Might is still staring at him from the corner of his eye, though, and he stays tensed, ready to run. Eraserhead murmurs something while Izuku just dips into a brief bow. He forces his hands to stay still, despite the way he knows they instinctively want to shake. "All Might," Nezu says with a human smile. "This is Shigaraki Izuku, and You are his son?" All Might interrupts Nezu, and his tone is nothing like the All Might the Japanese public knows and loves. Slowly, Izuku turns, and he faces down the giant, who has loosely curled his hands into fists. "Yes." A muscle spasms in All Might's face. A brief peek into his intent quirk immediately overwhelms him with a wave of disgust, hatred, outrage, hostility. Izuku slams the quirk off before he drowns in the intensity of All Might's feelings. He got his answer anyway. "He sent you here," All Might says with surety, like he's the expert in the room. Izuku looks at him like he's stupid. "Were you not listening when Nezu told you the situation? Or do you think you're smarter than the most intelligent mammal in Japan?" Blood rushes to All Might's face as it turns red with indignation and anger. "Don't play games with me, boy. Whatever tricks you pull on them won't work on me." The urge to snort is too strong to resist, so Izuku doesn't bother. "If I were playing a game, I would decline to include you in the dialogue, I assure you. The fact that I have to interact with you means I have no control here." There is a slight shift in All Might's body language for a moment, and Izuku realizes he somehow managed to confuse him. Izuku watches All Might shake himself, clearing his head. "State your real purpose," All Might orders. Izuku can feel the steadily growing annoyance and anger of Eraserhead behind him, and it's slightly vindicating. Nezu stays silent, watching, and Izuku wants to throw himself and the principal out the window, because this was obviously planned. To go to school, Izuku says dryly, and gives a thumbs up to All Might, who looks like he wants to grab Izuku's thumb and crush it in his hand. Pearly white teeth grind together. Izuku captures a glimpse of a spot of blood. Stop playing with me, child. I am being merciful right now. Answer my questions. And finally he says something that strikes Izuku's chords a little too close to the core. How many times has he heard his father say the same thing after putting him through hell and back? Merciful. Izuku's face twitches, even as it obediently settles back into blankness, as it's been trained. There is no such thing as mercy, not to him. I'm confused on what makes you think I owe you shit, Izuku says, his face blank but eyes raging and voice mockingly high. All Might is staring at him with something Izuku can only describe as unbridled hatred. The words make All Might snap finally, and he draws himself up, filled with self-righteous justice. Listen here, Vil. That's enough. Eraserhead steps in between them. You are a teacher right now, and you are expected to act like one. Eraserhead says sternly to All Might, who purses his lips. You don't understand, he tells Eraserhead, and Izuku thinks Eraser may actually blow steam from his ears. Eraserhead narrows his eyes, and Izuku watches All Might twitch like he wants to wince. Do not talk to me, Eraserhead says slowly, like I am a child. All Might seems to realize he has crossed a line, and he takes a breath, backing down from Eraserhead for the moment. Instead, he turns back to Izuku. I have a hard time believing your father just let you join UA with the intent of becoming a hero, All Might says, with anger still lingering in his voice, and Izuku thinks it's kind of a good point. Izuku tilts his head all the way up so he can make eye contact with the angry baby blue eyes. I've spent the last 5 years rebelling against him, and now that I'm smart enough to convert Tomura, he'd rather lose his unruly son than lose his willing successor. All Might presses his lips together tightly, and Izuku can tell he knows he isn't lying. He's probably also pondering the random name Izuku just said, but then again, thinking about two things at once may be beyond All Might's thinking capabilities. I want a list of every quirk you have, All Might suddenly demands, setting his hands on his hips in his classic hero pose. Izuku stares impassively back at him. Yeah, well, I want a dad that loves me, but we don't always get what we want, do we? There's a suspicious coughing noise from Eraserhead that Izuku suspects could be laughter, while All Might just sputters nonsensically. I'm not asking, child, All Might finally spits. Why would I give a man who clearly hates me the only information on me he has no way to get? Izuku asks All Might impertinently. I am the #1 hero, All Might shouts, and Izuku just rolls his eyes. And you got there by training to eradicate my father and all traces of him. Izuku curls his lips up at the figure towering over him. You can call yourself the #1 hero all you want, but right now all I see is another person using their power to shove me around. Eraserhead makes an aborted motion forward, like he wants to step in but doesn't know how to at this point. Nezu hasn't moved from where he sits calmly at his desk, paws folded, eyes darting between the figures in his office. All Might turns red in the face, and for a moment, Izuku actually wonders if the man is going to spontaneously explode with anger at his words. You are the symbol of your son, he said grandly, like it matters, like Izuku doesn't fucking know that. And yet you're the one acting like him right now, Izuku snarls, pure and unfiltered anger rising its way through his chest, his expression cracking open. All Might jolts back, like Izuku hit him, and the stricken look that rises on his face makes the hungry thing that lives in Izuku lick its lips. He doesn't take no for an answer either, Izuku snarls, and he's quick to throw around his title when he thinks it'll get him what he wants. All Might's expression twitches, something in his eyes crumbling. Izuku isn't done. Taking a single step forward, Izuku continues, his tongue going dark with something menacing. And, just like you, All Might, my father holds no regard for others unless they can do something for him. All for one, All Might physically takes a step back, like the name itself hurts him to hear. Would act exactly like you right now if you met your child, no matter who or what they were. That, of all things, seems to finally hit All Might. There is war in his eyes, and Izuku knows it because he's right. So you'll have to forgive me for treating you with the same caution I treat him. All Might stumbles away from Izuku like he's something viscerally horrifying, like he's something so twisted that All Might can't even bear to be near him. I am nothing like him, he finally says, but it sounds weak. Then stop acting like it, Izuku says definitively, then fully turns away from him and back to Nezu. He's finished talking with All Might. Izuku doesn't even bother looking at the symbol of peace. I believe it's time for you to take your leave, All Might, Nezu says, cutting through All Might's stuttering. I can handle it from here. It's a testament to how lost All Might must be, because he only stares for a few seconds before turning around and walking slowly to the door. It feels like his footsteps rattle the floor, but Izuku could be exaggerating. When All Might leaves, Present Mic steps in before the door closes, looking straight to Eraserhead with a raised eyebrow. Izuku notices. The office is silent. So, where were we? Nezu finally says, clasping his paws together. Izuku has several very interesting answers to that question, but he has a feeling that now is not the time, and he manages to choke them down. Introductions, Izuku says dryly, and it's the most polite he can bring himself to be. Something that could be a smile or a snarl curls on Nezu's face. So we were. On that note, Shigaraki-kun, this is Present Mic, or Yamata-san. Hisashi-kun, this is Shigaraki-Izuku. Izuku turns, meeting the green eyes of Present Mic through his yellow sunglasses. Nice to meet you, Shigaraki-kun, he exclaims, aiming stationary finger guns at him. Izuku has no idea what that's supposed to mean, but Present Mic is probably the only person who's been genuinely enthused to meet him, or is at least very good at pretending. In a split second, Izuku peeks at the strands from the intent quirk that's coming off Present Mic. Curiosity, concern, intrigue, excitement, kindness. Izuku offers him a bow. You as well, Yamada-san. Wow. Nezu claps his paws together. I'm sure you're wondering what it is I've called you here to discuss. Once again, Izuku resists the urge to say, obviously. I just have a few clarifying questions to ask, if you wouldn't mind, Nezu says, but it is very clearly not a request. Izuku just nods his head. Nezu glances at one of the papers on his desk. You mentioned that Offram was building several weapons. You listed yourself as one of them. Calmly, Nezu stares at Izuku and ignores the awkward noise Present Mic makes at Nezu's words. What are the others? The question was one Izuku was expecting, of course, but that doesn't make what he's about to talk about any less painful. He and a doctor are building genetic weapons with multiple quirks that will look and act like monsters. The information is startling, Izuku is well aware, but he keeps talking, because he can't stop himself at this point. The other main weapon is who I mentioned earlier. My brother. Tomura, Eraserhead murmurs, and if Izuku were a better person, he'd be touched that the hero remembered. Yes. And something interesting happens on Izuku's face. Something where, for a moment, it looks like it wants nothing more than to crumble into pieces and cry. And yet, he does not. Tomura is older than me. My father got Tomura when he thought I was not going to develop a quirk. His quirk. Izuku inhales, holding himself together. All for One has never seen Tomura as a person. He has and always will be a means to an end for him. I have to save Tomura. Izuku's clenched fists are pushed into the sides of the chairs. His face is disturbingly calm. I may not have ulterior motives, but I do have a personal goal, and it is to save my brother even if it costs me my life. Present Mic blanches, and even Eraserhead winces. Nezu doesn't move, his black eyes staring into Izuku's empty ones. And what if that cost is a hero's life? A student's life? Nezu asks, pressing Izuku. Izuku doesn't so much as blink. If you follow my plan, that won't happen. Your plan? Present Mic pipes up. For the first time, Izuku grins. It looks wrong, and later Aizawa realizes he smiles like Nezu does, like he's only copying human mannerisms. I didn't exactly come unprepared. I have a plan, and a contingency plan, and another contingency plan for that, and more after that. Eraserhead finally speaks, and yet you seem unsure of your own ending. Let me be as clear as possible. Izuku slays his palms out, flat on his knees. His shoulders look far too heavy. Tomura will never be free as long as my father lives. And although my first two plans end with me likely living, the ones after that do not. Because I will have to be the one to kill him. I'm the only one who can anymore. There is an aborted choking noise from Present Mic's direction, but Izuku doesn't look away from Nezu's face. I need to know Tomura will be taken care of if I'm gone. I'm not going to all of the effort to free him just so he can end up locked up, alone. He's always had me and Kurogiri. Now he just has Kurogiri. I refuse to leave him alone. Izuku's voice doesn't quite crack, but it comes close. He finally closes his eyes, looking down in his lap. A hand gently settles itself on his shoulder. Emitter and mutation, quirk erasure, eyes blink, weak temporal telekinesis, dry eye side effect. And Izuku lets it stay. I won't let him be forgotten, Eraserhead says, and Izuku takes it, because he knows it's all Eraserhead can promise him without consulting with Nezu and the authorities. Thank you, Izuku rasps, and Eraserhead doesn't know it, but Izuku has pulled up a quirk he's only used a handful of times, because of how rarely it's needed. Emitter, bond, promise, unconscious force, and he knows that whether or not Eraserhead means his words, he will obey them. Kurogiri? Nezu says, tilting his head after a moment of silence. Oh, Izuku blinks, pulling his thoughts together. Right, he's complicated. To put it as simple as possible, he's a sentient zombie with a fused quirk that's always been mean to Tomura's caretaker. Izuku's hesitation does not go unnoticed, he's sure, but no one says anything about it, fortunately. Sentient zombie? Present Mic yells, although not that loud, considering his quirk. Fused quirk? Nezu echoes, his ears straight in a motion Izuku knows means interest. Caretaker? Eraserhead says, and it almost makes Izuku crack a smile. Okay, to make it a little more complicated while still keeping it simple, Kurogiri is a Nomu. Nomu are creatures that are made from corpses, sometimes of multiple people, and usually they have multiple quirks shoved in them. That's what I meant earlier. Kurogiri is special because he's capable of independent action and thought, although he still has to obey my dad's overall commands and anything Tomura tells him. Izuku plows forward. He's always taken care of me and Tomura because my father was off being evil, I guess. I also think he doesn't like kids, but whatever. Anyway, Kurogiri cooks, cleans, tutors, goes shopping, and chauffeurs. I say he's special because all of the Nomu are brainless. They follow direct orders and that's it. Kurogiri can think for himself. Mostly. If father thinks he's getting too liberative with us, he takes Kurogiri in for a checkup. If it's even possible, I want to save him, too. Izuku frowns to himself, Kurogiri's yellow eyes glowing in his mind. His memories were erased, but sometimes I think there's a part of him that's still in there. He loves me and Tomura. And then, much softer, he told me that once. The adults in the room watch with something like regret and sorrow as Izuku looks up, face visibly hardening, his ever-present anger coming back to his face like it never ended. And father fixed him as soon as he found out. Izuku spits out the words like poison, and when Tomura asked him why, father told him it was because love is weak. Conviction bleeds from Izuku when he says, and that is why he must die. I will never have a family while he lives. It is quiet for a moment too long. I see, Nezu finally says. Very well. The only thing I require of you right now is to go over a few simple questions with the detective while wearing Quirk suppression cuffs. The one whose Quirk can detect lies, I suppose? Izuku ignores the incredulous stares from Eraserhead and Present Mic. Nezu almost looks amused. Yes, Detective Tsukauchi. When will he be here? Quite soon. Nezu peers at Izuku in a way that slightly reminds Izuku of Garaki. You're quite the interesting young man. Izuku stares at Nezu for a long moment. It hasn't come without a price. The principal's expression sobers. I'm sure. The four of them sit in silence for several minutes, and although Present Mic tries to break the awkward atmosphere a couple of times, Eraserhead eventually tells him something that gets him to stop, and Izuku is honestly grateful. Finally, Nezu's office door opens once more. Hello, I'm Detective Tsukauchi. One of the plainest men Izuku has ever seen bows in Izuku's direction when he enters the room. Izuku returns a shallow bow. This won't take long. Tsukauchi reassures Izuku. Not that Izuku is worried about that. Nezu hands the folder to the detective. I will be recording the conversation, and I need you to verbally respond to my questions, alright? The detective looks at Izuku and waits for him to nod before continuing. You probably know this, but my quirk is lie detector, which will be activated through the interview. If you have any objections, please state them now. Izuku shakes his head, and Tsukauchi sends him a tight smile. At the very least, Izuku can appreciate a man who knows how to stay professional despite his personal feelings on the subject. The detective sets the disc on the table in front of them, then presses a button. Detective Tsukauchi, ID 587468. Performing a requested interview on Shigaraki Izuku. Location, UA. Witnesses Yamada Hisashi, alias Present Mic, Aizawa Shota, alias Eraserhead, and Nezu. My Quirk will be activated to have this interview and the answers recorded. Shigaraki-kun, do you acknowledge this? Tsukauchi looks at Izuku. Yes. Thank you. Please state your name. Shigaraki Izuku. Truth. Who is your biological father? The villain known as All for One. Izuku watches as Tsukauchi flinches just slightly at the name. Truth. What are your motives for attending UA High School? I want to become a hero. I have the personal goal of wanting to save kids who have villains or criminals as parents. Present Mike's face twitches in Izuku's peripheral vision. Truth. Were you sent to UA by All for One or by another enemy of heroes? No. Truth. Are you still in contact with All for One? No. Although I'm sure he could find me if he really wanted to. Tsukauchi looks uneasy, as do the other adults, when he says, Truth. Are you in contact with any criminal or villainous contacts? No. Truth. Are you wearing any kind of electronic device right now? Good question. Izuku applauds him in his head. No. Truth. Do you have any intention to cause harm to the teachers or students of UA? Izuku shakes his head manually, even as he answers out loud. No. Truth. Do you have any intention of working or acting in tandem with any outside forces to plot or act against UA or heroes? What a complex question. Izuku wonders if Tsukauchi's quirk could really account for all of that. No. Truth. Do you plan to plot or act against UA as a whole or any hero? No. Wanted to be thorough, did they? Truth. Do you plan on taking any student or staff members of UA's quirks? Tsukauchi grimaces after asking. No. Izuku doesn't blame Nezu for wanting to know. If anything, he'd be stupid not to have asked. Truth. Tsukauchi glances down at the list of questions Nezu gave him, and he suddenly blanches. He pauses for a moment too long, and Izuku already knows he's about to hate this question. If you had to choose, he says slowly, would you save your brother's life or a hero's life? Izuku glances at Nezu and dares to raise an eyebrow at the mammal. They both know the question isn't necessary for the test. Nezu only smiles at him, showing his teeth. Since this is supposed to be a truth test, Izuku says, I'm going to be honest and tell you that I don't know. Tsukauchi's eyebrows fly up. It would all depend on everything that had led up to that moment. Who's the hero? What led them to being a moment from death? What led to Tomura being a moment from death? Izuku shrugs. A question like that is one that will always have constantly changing answers, because the variables will always change, from the weather to how much I slept the night before. Truth, Tsukauchi finally says, and he almost sounds a little confused by it. End of questioning, Tsukauchi says, then presses the button on the disc again before picking it up. He puts it back into his bag before he suddenly pauses, then turns to look at Izuku. Wait. If you aren't All for One, where are you even living right now? The detective asks with crumpled eyebrows, and Izuku internally winces. Fuck. I had the situation covered, Izuku says. And while he knows Tsukauchi will register the word as truth, he also knows it will not be a satisfactory answer. Based on the look Eraserhead immediately gets on his face, Izuku knows he may as well have just told the truth. Try again, Eraserhead dryly says, making Izuku grimace. This is going to be a pain. Nowhere, Izuku groans, because he knows there's no way the heroes won't do something about it. You call that having the situation covered? The detective says with a wry smile. Roughly exhaling, Izuku slumps into the chair. Detective, there are very few situations I could get into that I wouldn't be able to cover. An awkward silence follows Izuku's words, as if the adults in the room briefly forgot that the child in front of them was a verifiable powerhouse, probably capable of going against All Might. But then again, Tsukauchi hadn't asked any questions about his quirk. Perhaps Nezu's version of an olive branch? Fortunately, we're already working on a plan, listener, Present Mike says, pointing a finger dramatically at Izuku like he just won a prize on a TV show. Before Izuku could say anything, Eraserhead continued. We figured that would be the case, and we've already decided the easiest and best solution for everyone would be for you to come live with us. Izuku can't stop one of his eyebrows from raising. You and Present Mike? he says, ignoring the important parts of the sentence. That'll be correct, Present Mic says, and everyone in the room is promptly startled as Izuku clenches his hand into a fist and pulls it downward as he hisses. Fuck yeah, tomorrow owes me 2,000 yen. Eraserhead sighs for an inhumanly long time, rubbing one hand against the top of his forehead. Why is it always me? He mutters to himself. Unfortunately for him, Izuku hears him, and once again can't stop himself from responding with the truth no one wants to hear. Because you're the only one who actually believes in the villain's son. Izuku looks at Present Mic for a moment, then, too, whose expression has turned to grim. You two aren't afraid of me, even though you should be, so you're stuck with me. Of course we aren't afraid of you, Present Mic says, and although Izuku knows he's trying to comfort him, he just shakes his head in response. You should be. Everyone is right to stay away from me. And Izuku isn't sad as he says it, because it's a fact, and one that he came to terms with a long time ago. He is nothing like anyone, and when people know who or what he is, they inevitably end up trembling at his feet. Izuku can't tell if Present Mic looks more sad or disappointed in his answer. Fear is what makes the world turn, Present Mic. Looking away, Izuku glances out the window in Nezu's office. And I spin on an axis of my own. Well, I think that's all I needed, Tsukauchi finally says awkwardly, and it jolts everyone out of the stupor they'd suddenly lulled into. Ah, yes, thank you for coming, Detective, Nezu says, and Tsukauchi bows in his direction before offering nods at Eraserhead and Present Mic, then a wave at Izuku before booking it out of the room. Izuku didn't really blame him, to be honest. Was there anything else? Izuku turns to Nezu, and while he's being a bit rude, he's annoyed and tired enough not to care. Today has been the most social interaction he's had in years. Oh no, that's all. Thank you, Shigaraki-kun. Nezu waves a paw, which is evidently a dismissal because Present Mic and Eraserhead move to the door. Izuku is quick to follow. They walk the halls in silence, and apart from the occasional whispered words between Eraserhead and Present Mic, who wisely aren't letting Izuku out of their sight, there isn't a lot of conversation going on. I've got to get my things. Izuku turns to walk away from Eraserhead and Present Mic at the gate of UA. I'll find you afterward, don't worry. We'll come with you, listener, Mic is quick to say, sliding in front of Izuku on the sidewalk. Izuku stares at them for a long moment, then grins in a way that could almost be considered teasing if it wasn't so full of spite. Good luck with that, Izuku says, and it doesn't sound pleasant. Eraserhead's face immediately changes, and his quirk flares as his scarf goes to lash out, but it's too late because Izuku has taken off, moving far faster than he should be able to, and is already out of Eraserhead's sight. Fuck, Mic mutters for the both of them.